Well, it is so good to be here. It is so good to be back. For those of you whom I have not met yet, my name is Father Grant Colburn, and I am your new associate. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, 2 years ago, I was a seminarian here, and since then, I have been with Father Cladar up in Crystal Lake. He was my last assignment before coming back here. So what I thought I would do is just give you maybe a little bit of my story. So my hometown is called Pecatonica, and you get brownie points if you can tell me after Mass where that is, because most people don't know. But it's a small farm town, maybe like 30 minutes west of Rockford itself, and my family has lived there my entire life. I went to high school there, was very involved in choir and band, and ran cross country and track while I was there, and continued to run when I went to college. I went to St. Ambrose University, which is in Davenport, but never really during that time, especially in high school, thought of the priesthood. That was never really something that I thought the Lord had in store for me, but certainly came from a very strong Catholic family. There was never a question whether or not we were going to be in the pews for Sunday Mass. It was just assumed that we were going to be there. But remember, during my freshman year, started going to daily Mass. And I remember the reason why I made that decision was because it fit into my running schedule and my class schedule. And I just thought, this is something that maybe I should start doing if I want to start taking my faith seriously. So just slowly started to go. And the thought that kind of got planted into my mind was seeing the priest up on the altar and just thinking to myself, yeah, that's something maybe I could see myself doing someday, because at that point I had declared a theology major. And so my friends were like, well, you're majoring in theology, but what are you going to do with that? Maybe you can teach, maybe you can go into some sort of youth ministry program. But this idea of the priesthood had slowly started to be planted because of receiving the Eucharist every day and the grace that comes with that. But really kept that to myself for a very long time. That is until went downstairs to where the chaplain's place was, the place that he stayed while he was on campus. And he was not in his office, but there was this little pamphlet that was sitting outside of his room that was titled, "So You're Thinking About Becoming a Catholic Priest?" And I was like, well, maybe I am sort of thinking about this. So I was like, well, I might as well take this and read it. So I took the pamphlet and went upstairs into the chapel and sat in front of the Blessed Sacrament, read the pamphlet, and then at the very end of the pamphlet, there was sort of like a prayer of surrender, right? So it said something along the lines of, so this is something that you're taking seriously. You have to give it to the Lord, and you have to give him permission to work. So I prayed that prayer, stood up, walked out into the gathering space, and Father Chuck, the chaplain, was standing there. He was like, "Hey, Grant, I've noticed you've been coming to daily Mass every day. That's a beautiful thing." And I was like, yeah, it just fit into my schedule, so I started coming. And he was like, well, we're having a dinner tomorrow night with the bishop and the vocation director for men who are considering the priesthood. And I was like, wow, how convenient. I literally just prayed this prayer, and now you're inviting me to this dinner. So I remember just being very flustered. I remember calling my mom and sort of flipping out, like, maybe the Lord wants me to become a priest. But I remember going to that dinner and the thing that stuck with me for the next 4 years of college was how happy the priests were there. And that never left me throughout the discernment process. So I eventually declared to study for the Diocese of Davenport because it just felt very natural to study for them. The chancery is right across the street from the college itself, so it was just very simple. But about 2 years into seminary, it became very clear that the Lord was calling me to return home to the Diocese of Rockford, because that's where the seeds had been planted and that's where the roots were. So I've been studying for the Diocese of Rockford at Mundelein Seminary for the past 7 years. And I was there until about 1 month ago. We were on this silent retreat that is required of men before they join the priesthood. And I remember praying on that retreat with the real responsibility and the weight that the priesthood entails. And I knew that the seminary had prepared me well for my first assignment, but there was also this acknowledgement inside of me that God had chosen to give this gift of the priesthood to a small country boy from Pecatonica. And that recognition was incredibly humbling. And it is precisely that humility, this ability to remain small in the eyes of the Lord, that the readings for today speak of. Remaining small in the eyes of the Lord does not mean weakness, or that we are worthless and not worthy of God's love. It means that we recognize, just as Ezekiel does in our first reading, that the Lord has the power to lift us up and to cultivate the strengths that we have and use them to bear fruit not only in the lives we have, but in the lives of those that we love. And that building up, that cultivation, is certainly something that I experienced during the last 7 years of seminary, as the Lord has picked and pruned his way through even the smallest seeds that have been in my life and help them continue to grow. That is something the Lord wants for each and every one of us, to allow him to cultivate the land of our soul and the areas that remain small, but are called to spring up and become the largest parts of our person, capable of receiving each responsibility and each gift the Lord wills to give each and every one of us.